This is Wikipedia Weekly, episode 115 for the week of June 7th, 2014. Welcome to another episode of Wikipedia Weekly. I'm your host, Andrew Lee, also known as User Fuzzheado on the English Wikipedia.
I'm James Forrester, or JD Forrester.
I'm Tom, user Galliero on the English Wikipedia.
I'm Jim Hayes, user Slow King on the Commons and Wikisource.
All right, so welcome to another episode of Wikipedia Weekly. The last last 5 episodes we've had of Wikipedia Weekly have been from Wikiconference USA. So hopefully you've been listening to those, but for folks who are jumping in here without hearing those, I definitely welcome you to go back and listen to episodes 109 through 114, where we have 2 roundups of Wikiconference USA, that was in New York City, and interviews with folks like James Heilman of Wiki Project Med Foundation, or Frank Schulenberg from the Wiki Education Foundation, and Evan Amos, who ran the Venamo Online Game Museum. So hopefully you'll get to hear those and get a catch-up on what happened at Wikiconference USA. But Jim, we were just there in New York City. Any last thoughts on Wikiconference USA? Jim Hayes? Well, maybe Jim doesn't hear us. Jim, do you hear us? Jim?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Any last thoughts on Wikiconference USA?
Yeah. Yep. Sorry. I noticed that Samaras Talk. Yeah.
Oh, Sumana's talk?
Yeah. Got picked up by Boing Boing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm getting some feedback.
Oh, okay. Jim, I'm sorry, James, you're going to have to pronounce Sumana's last name because I can never pronounce it. But tell us, Sumana is a senior writer at the Wikimedia Foundation, is that right?
Yeah, she works as part of the community developer community engagement team here at the foundation. And yes, she's a senior technical writer. And I also can't properly pronounce her surname, and consequently I don't, which is the eternal opt-out. So she's just Sumana, or Sumana H,
right.
Which is cheating. Then sorry, Sumana. I should try better.
Yeah, but as Jim said, you know, Sumana gave the opening keynote at the the Wikiconference USA, and it was really interesting. She actually had a whole talk about how Wikipedia needs to put hospitality as one of its values up top, whereas we always talk about freedom and some of this hacker ethos, but she was talking about her experience in being at a hacker school where their social rules are a little bit different, and maybe we could borrow some of these into Wikipedia. I think my one-line takeaway from it is, you know, why can't we put hospitality as one of those values that we push in the community, which actually, I guess, drives a lot of what you see with what Brandon and the folks at the Wikimedia Foundation are trying to do with a lot of these new features, right, James, in terms of providing the Wiki Love or the thank button, trying to add features that build community and build up things rather than blocking or undoing or reverting and these kind of technical features that try to stop things.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Although I wouldn't presume to suggest that technical solutions can solve social problems, there's certainly an element of responsibility that engineering and especially product development / design have with regard to encouraging and fostering a positive rather than negative and collaborative rather than confrontational approach. So rather than have a biggest button in the interface be revert, possibly have the biggest button be a positive action. Make it easier to do the positive things that grow the community rather than the negative things that perhaps protect the community but don't necessarily improve it. Often we get reports from newbies or former newbies that they tried to engage and found it alienating, or they didn't have any contact at all. Occasionally you get negative reports. It's quite rare that you get positive reports. And so I can talk about having received very positive kind of community interaction when I was a newbie back in 2002 and 2003, but our community was incredibly small back then, and the fact that I had interaction with half a dozen of our sysops just by casual, posts in a talk page or in edit summary interactions doesn't really scale nowadays. And so we need to look at technical solutions that can help people say thank you for an edit or suggest improvements in a way that doesn't necessarily sound like it's reverting someone, but kind of says, so-and-so improved your edit with this follow-up, or since you made your edit, 55 people have seen it, or kind of interaction patterns like that. That said, obviously, anything that interferes with any existing workflows is something that's going to have a lot of discussion and thought around it before it goes out there, because it's very important not to kind of get in the way of the community doing its core thing, which is making the content. And as editors, I and other people at the foundation are very, very keen to make editing easier and better, but not in any way damage existing editing patterns.
I think that I think that civility has something to play in here, because we've sort of had a long-term in the community dispute over, is civility still one of our core values, and should it be one of our core values? So I think she's taking a side in that 3 to 4 year long dispute. I think that's how long it's been running.
3 to 4 year dispute.
Well, I mean, the sort of idea that somebody says something mean to me, so I jump on ANI, and on ANI things happen, but then it's come to that nothing really happens, so it's become an arbitration committee sort of thing with the civility enforcement case last year.
Right.
And further.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that was a result of the Wiki conference was a kind of amusing yet kind of weird write-up by New York Magazine. So if anyone knows about New York Magazine, they are an eclectic mix of entertainment, very, how would you say, very on-the-ground reporting or even opinion of what life is like in New York. And there actually was a journalist from New York Magazine, Jessica Pressler, who was there and spent actually not 1 but 2 days at Wikiconference and wrote a pretty colorful description of Kevin Rutherford, Alex Stinson, Frank Schulenberg was part of that write-up too. Didn't really make them look great, and in some ways kind of still reflected some of the cliches about Wikipedia's community being, very male and being kind of geeky and techie, which I thought was a little bit unfair, because if you look at the photo of our conference of 100, 150 folks, this was the closest I've ever seen a Wiki conference be 50-50 male-female. I think in the end it was like 60% male, 40% female, which is huge because, James, you and I know, we've been in every Wikimania. It's never really been 60-40 or anything in that area.
No, not even remotely that area. And I mean, seeing the photos from the event, it made me kind of sad that I hadn't attended, although obviously had I attended, I'd have skewed the numbers back the wrong way. I'd be really fascinated to kind of hear your thoughts on whether you felt that the gender diversity balance at the Wikiconference had an impact on the kind of tenor of the conversations, on whether you think that was a positive outcome or whether it didn't have a noticeable effect for you.
Yeah, the funny thing is I didn't even consciously realize until someone pointed out that 3 of the 4 keynotes were female. Until someone said, "Isn't this great? 3 of the 4 speakers were women." And I said, "Oh, I didn't even think about that." I guess that's a positive thing that I really didn't think of the gender when these things came up. The other thing I thought was probably something that isn't the same for other conferences is that for whatever reason, the 2 big chapters that dominate the U.S. side of things, obviously Wikimedia DC and New York City that have organized it, are overwhelmingly GLAM-oriented. So I think that had a big role to play, right? So a lot of librarians, a lot of museum folks, a lot of folks related to medicine. So whether it's Wiki Project, Med Foundation, or NIH, or things like that, you had a lot of folks from like-minded institutions that have a lot more women in them. But that's great. I mean, this is actually what I've been preaching for a long time, is that by teaching Wikipedia to folks in the museum sector or GLAM sector or journalism, which are 70% female, this can maybe help balance out the gender ratios, and maybe this is the beginning of that trend that we're seeing, at least between DC and New York, as the anchors of Walrus. Wikipedia, what is it? Wikimedians active
in their local regions of the United States. I was the Secretary of Walrus for about a year and a half.
Wait, tell me, I didn't know this. You were Secretary of Walrus?
Pretty much, I was the one that made all of the notes for our monthly IRC meetings until those sort of ended. And then I quit for a number of reasons. I don't know. It wasn't an elected position. It sort of was. Pharos came up and said, "You seem organized. You seem like you have time. Therefore, you will be doing this." And I was like, okay. I don't see Walrus sort of taking off because it's only the DC chapter, DC, New York City. The New England doesn't seem to be making much headway into changing from just a group of users there. And then nowhere else really seems to have a pooling of users that you have enough people to do a full chapter in.
Yeah, I mean, this brings up the bigger question of what is the future. I mean, it was a very good conference in that it was, I think what I said at the end, it reminded me a lot of the very first Wikimania in 2005, where it really was about interesting people doing interesting things. There's a lot of contact with individuals around tables and clustering and kind of cool stuff, whereas a lot of the Wikimania conferences these days are dominated by a lot of chapter stuff, movement stuff, organizational stuff. But I do wonder going forward whether it's going to stay at the small size, or as you said, outside of DC and New York, is there hope of U.S. chapters growing and becoming healthy and a place for recruiting more folks? I don't know, James, whether you have any ideas on that, because for a long time the U.S. chapters have had this problem of identity and whether they really are reaching out to grow more, real collaboration among American Wikipedians.
Sure. I think actually there's kind of 2 interesting questions. One of them is does this event presage a wider uptake of the chapter model, per se within the United States or within North America, shall we say? Because although Wikimedia Canada does exist, its existence is more in name than in a huge number of activities. But there's also the question of events, right? So this is the first time we've had an event that sort of feels like a regional conference in the way that people have talked about it, in the breadth of content, in the scale of the venue and the undertaking. And maybe that's something that we could see happen more frequently, not necessarily once a year, but not necessarily only once a decade. I'd love to see kind of regional, continental Wikimania-like conferences on every continent. Certainly, the big continents with lots of participation. I think it's a shame that in years where, so this year, for example, Wikimania is in London, people in South America have almost no opportunity to go to Wikimania in terms of cost. It's incredibly expensive to go from South America to Europe at all, let alone London. And I'd love to see kind of a fostering of a series of events like that. On the chapter side, I think the chapter model, and I speak as founding secretary of Wikimedia UK, right? So clearly I was, chapter number 2 or 3, depending on whether you count when we filed the paperwork. I thought the chapter model was a really good one early on, and I think it still has some promise, but the nature of the relationship that you have with a chapter is pretty rooted in a relatively un-American concept of belonging that in the US, and here I'm going to start treading in Tom's area, but socially feels to be fulfilled by other routines. I don't know whether the chapter model is something that can work at the scale of the US. There's, it's so diverse. There's so many cities that are so far from each other. But also, I don't think chapters are particularly sexy or cool, and that may not attract people. That doesn't mean that we can't organize things, but I think the number of people interested in doing glam outreach, which seems to be kind of what the chapters do best as a model, is limited. And that doesn't mean that it's not fantastic work and we should encourage it and help improve it. But it may not scale out to, Wikimedia Idaho, having enough people who want to run a chapter. And that doesn't mean that people in Idaho will never do anything valuable. I'm sure we have loads of great editors there. But maybe we need a way of helping them and representing them and supporting them and giving them a social outlet or a community outlet for Wikimedia that doesn't kind of hook on a chapter concept that's focused on programs and activities. And maybe more of a kind of social club would be a better way of kind of helping bring editors together and feel like part of a community.
Tom?
I mean, it would be nice in the United States every year that Wikimedia isn't in the United States or in, say, North America. So, like, next year it's going to be in South Africa, which is a very expensive place to fly to.
Mexico City.
And then Mexico City's the year after, right?
No, Mexico City's next year.
After London, yeah.
Okay.
After London.
South Africa.
So Mexico City, Wikiconference USA wouldn't make sense because it isn't that far away. But the next year after, if it's going to be probably somewhere else in the world, because they don't do 2 continents in a row, the selection committee. Every year it's changed from a different continent. So it would be nice then to be able to have a conference somewhere in the United States because it would be a lot cheaper for Americans to fly to. And it's a good thing, I think, for people from the United States to be able to actually meet up for, if you're doing research, to present your research, your findings. If you're doing community involvement, talk to other people. So I think the model of a Wikiconference USA is something we shouldn't forget about. Or we shouldn't say, once every 5 years we're going to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from what I remember, I think the cost they predicted, or they estimated for this, I think there's actually, it's down on paper because it was a PEG grant, it was about 20 to 30K, which is actually really cheap for a gathering like this. And the New York Law School donated the space, I believe, and they did a pretty good job of making it very inexpensive. So if they can repeat that model, I think having it yearly is not out of the question at all. And I think Tom's idea is good.
I also think it would be possible to have this even in years when Wikimania happens to be in North America. Apart from us not having it 1 year makes it much harder to keep that cadence going, the regular, every year it is, at this time. But also, May or June is a good time of year. It's distinct from the summer rush. It is a shorter, much more kind of tight event, but it can focus on more local issues. Wikimania, as the global conference, is always going to be pretty kind of generic, and if you want to talk about things that are very US specific, it's harder to get enough numbers in the room. Even in Mexico, I doubt there are going to be as many Americans as would be if it was in, Colorado or whatever. Just because, going outside the country is that one extra step. And similarly for Europe, I'd really love there to be a Wikiconference Europe every year in April, May. There's the Wikimedia Chapter Conference, which I think is really disappointing in how it crowds out the space, in Europe, for there being a community conference, because the chapters aren't the community. Chapter board, in particular, and chapter staff have a clandestine, private, secret meeting, and community people who want to talk about editing, who want to talk about, working together, don't have that opportunity.
James, do you think that chapters meeting actually kind of sucks the atmosphere out of having some kind of community-oriented?
Yeah, I do. I've repeatedly complained about them mislabeling it the Wikimedia Conference. It's not the Wikimedia Conference. It's nothing to do with Wikimedia. It's to do with Wikimedia organizational bodies, and they should label it as such. And they refused. They've said, no, we disagree. It's all about all Wikimedia. Possibly people might think that I have sour grapes, because back when I was running a chapter, there wasn't such thing as the Wikimedia Chapter Conference, and that came along later. But I think that it's actually pernicious. Having an organizational summit is a totally valuable thing, but it should be very careful not to confuse people as to thinking that this is the event in the spring that is something people can go to and take part in. And those happen in Northern Europe mostly, but why don't we have Wikiconference Catalonia? Why don't we have Wikiconference in Milan? Milan's fantastic, around by the lakes, it'd be great. But why don't we as a community of European Wikimedians get together? I say this as someone living in San Francisco, so I don't really have a good leg to stand on. But my passport lets me claim that I'm a Wikimedian from Europe as long as I want to go. But also Asia as well.
I will be a person that will say, I'm a person that will say that I think that the Chapters Conference is a complete waste of money, because we're spending money for all of these people that are either board members or executive directors to get together and sit around, and I haven't seen anything useful to come out of the last 3 of these. I see the foundation pour lots of money into this event, and then after pouring lots of money in this event, they don't decide anything. If they do decide anything, it falls apart within a year. And we end up with nothing to show for having a whole conference.
So even for chapters which have a very hierarchical organizational structure where the board can make a decision, the board doesn't attend. 2 members of their board attend at most. So they can never bind themselves to decisions they make at the chapter meetup. If you shipped 8 people from each chapter around the world for a week out to Europe and then back, it would cost even more, several $1 million rather than a couple of $100,000 or whatever the budget is. I don't think it's that high actually. But yeah, I think there have been valuable things that have come out of the chapter conference, and I know that a lot of good practice is shared through that. But I think there are. I don't want to say that the chapter conference shouldn't exist. I think that's generally a question for the people funding it and the people partaking in it. I just think that it shouldn't crowd out community events that actually express the editing community getting together. I also say that I speak as chairman of the Wikimania committee, for what it's worth. So I'm very much focused on there being lots of opportunity for community people to discuss things and meet up with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, James. I mean, I think one of two things needs to happen. Either one, you just relabel that conference. I do think it's quite annoying to say this is the Wikimedia conference, but you are not invited because it's a really exclusive circle of folks who are allowed to do that. And two, um, I've asked several folks this is why don't you have, in addition to that summit of the chapter people, at least one day before or after, which has a community event, even if it's just like a massive meetup or massive editathon or a full-blown conference. Why not take advantage of the fact that, okay, you have 2-3 days maybe of executive session. It's invite only. It's those folks who are chapter leaders. But why not have that adjacent to a real community event and build on the efficiencies of getting people together in one place for that? I mean, I know the venue might have to change because you're accommodating maybe 200, 300 people rather than 60 or 70. But it just seems like it's either one, a lost opportunity, or two, just kind of a bad taste in the mouth with the community to say that this conference called the Wikimedia Conference just doesn't have you in mind.
Yeah, I would like it if they could incorporate some training or some, officer talk about how we run a chapter, and avoid problems.
Yep, I agree, and it's one of those things where I don't even know where you would start to try to change it. It seems like it has its own momentum at this point that it's just going to keep on going. So, James, keep fighting the good fight. I think you're on the right path, but I don't know if it's going to change anytime soon. Yeah. Other things. So actually, I don't know if we talked about this, but so Lila had the first meeting where she addressed the staff as the ED. I guess this is June 5th, the metrics meeting. So, James, maybe you can answer this for me. It's called the metrics meeting, but there's a lot more than metrics that happens at the metrics meeting. It seems to be like the standing big meeting every month.
It is. It's actually officially called the Metrics and Monthly Activities Meeting.
Okay.
Yes, people just call it metrics for short. It's the only real all-staff meeting that happens every month. And obviously, as a transparent organization, we are, broadcast it live and recorded versions, and people hang out on IRC and ask questions. I often act as the IRC moderator, so often the questions come out with my stern, booming British voice, which is always good when people ask difficult questions, because that makes me unpopular. And the idea is that people can hold themselves, be held to account. So the foundation is telling people what's happening, but people can actually see what's happening. They can not just have to read reports, but they can actually see people being asked questions and respond directly and ask their own questions if they happen to be able to join the stream and watch an RC.
Right. And with the caveat that, of course, she's your boss, so you can't say everything that you might want to say. But I thought it was interesting that her first presentation that she gave was pretty good. I think, Jim, if you want to jump in at some point, you were the one who brought this issue up. In terms of her management style, looks pretty good in terms of being on the job only a few days, but setting her kind of management style footprint on the room. But she did bring up something very tangible, which I was kind of surprised by, that she brought up the monthly page views chart and the total active editors chart, and was quick to say, we've got a problem here. What did you think about that, James and Jim?
So, sorry, Jim, you can go first.
Oh, why, thank you. I was just impressed about the users are the boss, which to me is good reinforcement. And then the whole accountability thing, act and be accountable, fail faster. And then, yes, we keep bringing up the user decline over and over again, and I don't know what the solution is, if it's a cultural solution, but I mean, she's looking and pushing the user experience part of it, so we'll see whether we can get some consensus there in the foundation.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything remotely controversial, I would hope, but there's always been this massive dichotomy between what kind of social media websites say is typical. So the typical numbers are 99-1. So 90% of your audience just read, 9% take part, and 1% of your audience actively take part. And we've never had those numbers. Not since maybe really early on, but we've always been something like 99.999, 0.00099, 0.00001 in terms of actual participation, and making participation easier. We talked in a variety of contexts about possibly micro contributions. So something that's really exciting in this area is Magnus Mansk built a kind of gamified tool that actually asks you some really quick questions. It puts, for example, a bio of someone and says, is this person male or female? Because they're clearly a person. In the system, it doesn't actually know whether they're male or female. You can say male, female, don't know, and you get that done pretty quickly. And he put out a blog post saying that in 2 weeks, he had about 400,000 edits made to Wikidata based on that, which is like amazing. But that kind of quick, easy micro-interaction is something that we could open out to more people potentially, and not have a 500 million to 100,000 ratio, but instead have a 500 million to 1 million ratio, which is still, serious, but, improving by 5 times, 10 times the number of editors, and democratizing our changes might be something that really transforms our relationship in terms of our readers. A lot of almost all of our readers are passive consumers of our content, and if that's great for them, that's great. But we may want to think about whether that's something they're actively choosing, or whether it just never occurs to them that they themselves are someone who could edit.
Any thoughts?
This is partially a cultural thing, though. I think sort of the editor is a cultural thing because if you've ever seen, what's his name? He's one of the people that founded the Creative Commons. He did a TED Talk, and whatever you think about TED, one of the things he brought up was that for the last about 100 years, the United States has had a culture of you sort. He lost my train of thought. Basically, America has a read-only culture. You've never been able to write for the last 100 years since, like, the phonograph came out, and all the music that you started listening to was pre-recorded. Nobody took part. So it's a really weird thing in people's mind that they can edit Wikipedia, or you can get an article on the front page of Wikipedia. I mean, I have some real-life friends here. I'm staying at school over the summer, so on a weekend, hey, do you want to put something on the front page? And they thought this was going to be big in the world and it would take hours of work. And in reality, a DYK is 1,500 characters. So we've built this idea among people that Wikipedia is this great big thing and I could never take part. But then because of that, we have lots of readers because people think we're truthful, but it isn't. I don't know. It's filled with contradictions.
Yeah, I mean, and part of what you just mentioned was part of the metrics meeting. Go ahead.
For the foundation itself, we don't want to turn the view graph and the editor's graph into a meme. That, oh no, we bring this up all the time, but we never do anything. And it's starting to feel like that, where everybody cares about the shrinking number of editors, but nobody wants to do anything.
Well, right, because we can't even agree on what it means, right? There's some people who just think that 4.5 million articles, we actually don't need as many people as we had in the past, so why do we even worry about the declining numbers of participants, right? But one thing that has been a new thing last year or so is the number of page views, right? So in the metrics meeting, there was some discrepancy. ComScore seems to think we are getting fewer and fewer page views for the last year and a half or so. the Wikimedia Foundation numbers have it kind of flattening out as steady. James, can you summarize kind of what was the, I don't know about the conclusion, but what was mentioned in the meeting as some of the takeaways?
Sure. So ComScore is a company that measures website hits, and specifically they measure unique hits per month to websites, a lot of websites, pretty much the entire internet. They're generally the industry standard for measuring that number, and that number is important to commercial companies because that's the basis on which you can sell the prestige of your adverts. So for almost everyone on the internet, these are incredibly important numbers. ComScore give us this data for us ourselves, not for other companies. So these are the numbers we have, so these are the numbers we talk about. And ComScore have been pretty reliable in the sense of making us, they've gone up historically when we've noticed that traffic has gone up. So we have been able to track it. It's not been a one-to-one map even since the early days. There's some things they count that we don't, and vice versa. And the page impressions count is not something they focus on. They focus on unique people. They've had us steady at around 500 million uniques, plus minus a few million, for a while. Our internal numbers have a bigger degree of kind of month-to-month variation, but they're also going in a slightly different direction. Now, ComScore are the industry standard, but they're also focused on a particular outcome. They're focused on basically people you can sell adverts to. So from ComScore's perspective, it's much more important to track down, the hockey mom in Wisconsin using an iPad than it is necessarily to track people using mobile telephony in sub-Saharan Africa. And whereas we don't care as much about how valuable the person's wallet is, we care about their eyes. And because of that, we probably want slightly different things from the data. So our data about what people see, we see in our logs, and what ComScore, may differ somewhat, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. There's also, a lot of complicating factors. The variability from month to month is really quite high. There's a big September rush. There's a big dip in December, if I remember correctly, because people take a lot of time off. There's peaks around exam season from different countries and things like that, which is fascinating to tell the stories that those kind of spikes in the data tell. But there's also a lot of intermediation now of Wikipedia content, and that's a good thing. If you search for something basic, often structured data or the semi-structured data in the info box will have been extracted by Google and put up in a little box in the top right as you're searching. So you never need a Wikipedia page, but you're definitely reading Wikipedia content. If you use the dictionary application bundled with Mac OS X since, I believe, the original version on Apple, that pulls data from Wikipedia just silently and through the API. But again, no one's hitting the website. And all that, the things like that, very common. Facebook pages built out of Wikipedia data. So kind of there's this question of we keep talking about the ComScore numbers, but there are probably some better numbers that we want to care about and that more closely reflect our goals as an organization, which is to help readers by giving them educational content. And if that's not on our website, then that's potentially risky in terms of people not caring about us as a brand, not caring about us as a community, not wanting to join us as an editor. We can never invite someone on Google's website to join and edit Wikipedia. Google could, theoretically, but they're probably not going to. Whereas on our website, we can make the edit button bold and pink and flashing and get bigger and bigger the more you read the page until finally the entire screen is one great big pink edit button. We're probably not going to do that either, but when people are reading the content on Google, they're definitely never going to get that. But also, people who aren't on our website don't get the opportunity to donate to us. And, I should declare my interest as a staff member of the foundation, but that's potentially bad. not just for paying people like me salaries, but making sure the actual servers keep running, making sure that we can keep serving Wikipedia articles to whoever we want. And I think I'm gone way too long on this answer, but I think there's kind of it's a good opportunity to kind of pause for thought as Lila takes over and think, well, hang on, what exactly do we actually want to see happen in these things? And is this sort of data leading us in the wrong direction? And I look forward to seeing where we take it.
Yeah, I think a few meetings ago, someone had brought up that question IRC, and since you're the IRC guru, you probably were the ones who related it about whether Google Knowledge Graph is a problem and whether Google would at least provide some metrics on, I don't know what those metrics might be, but at least to have maybe the Wikimedia Foundation measure impact, if not page views of its content, or at least stats on what people are seeing in terms of Wikipedia's content come up in Google Knowledge Graph results. And maybe in the future, as you said, maybe we can't rely on people who use Wikipedia stuff as seeing Wikipedia's pages and seeing Jimmy's fundraising face at the top, so that maybe the foundation has to start advertising on like NPR and places like that, saying, "Hey, have you used Wikipedia recently? You better donate to, Wikipedia to keep it going because you're not seeing our little ads at the top of the page, even though you're using our data." Right? I think we're quite far off from that, but it's one of those things where it'll be a challenge. As you said, as more people use the CC by SA ability of the content, maybe we will just not have to expect the same number of page views as in the past.
At the same time, when we released all of our stuff under this open source license, didn't we think that, say, Google, it's a lot easier to never have them leave the page? In Google's mind, this is great. We can bring in all this data. It's already in metadata format, so we can choose how we're going to format it. All we need to do for attribution is put a little link at the bottom saying this is from Wikipedia under the CC BYSA. And the same thing's true with like Facebook. It's wonderful for them because people get to find out the information they want. It's from a source that won't sue them for using it. And you never have to have them leave your leave your website.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's one of the intended uses of the content, right? But we're kind of in uncharted territory here. What is the long-term health of Wikipedia content if the people who read it are not seeing either chances to edit it or be participants in the community or to donate money? That is kind of uncharted territory, isn't it?
Yeah, my concern is with editor decline is that we need to reach out to expert editors, and where it seems we're not doing it. We're not replacing the Watowitzes, and we need to train and grow those people. We need, if anything, 10 times as many to 100 times.
Yeah, and maybe that's why in the U.S. we've been emphasizing GLAM so much to try to build up that side of things, to engage experts in those areas. So, well, we'll see. I mean, I think every metrics meeting is fascinating just because we get one more little chunk of those graphs and we get to try to tell time by looking at the second hand. And I think it is kind of silly to try to micro-analyze some of those, month to month transitions on that graph, but we just can't resist. So we'll keep looking at it and seeing what we can conclude from those. Let's go on to another thing that's kind of cool that maybe most people don't know about, which is Wikimedia DC is sponsoring something called Summer of Monuments, which I believe was kind of based off of Summer of Code from Google. But this is an idea that we're going to have a manager who will try to rally the community to take photos and write Wikipedia articles on monuments around the East Coast. Is it, Jim? You know more about this than I do because you are much more active.
Well, The details are on the Wikimedia DC website. Leo Zimmerman has been hired for this slot, and it's really the southeastern United States, which have the lowest percentage of photos for National Register Historic Places or other monuments. So that's the idea, is to try and set up some local Wikipedians and get them to upload content.
Nice. And this will be lasting how long?
Well, I don't know. All summer. I mean, the more details are there. Um, James Hare is, the other folks at Wikimedia DC know more about it than me.
Right. I think it lasts till October, and they are basically hiring Leo Zimmerman to be the project manager to reach out to existing efforts in these different states. So I guess they say a contiguous block of states in the East Coast: Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi. Yeah, so I think it's kind of a cool project. They are going to be doing a bunch of edit-a-thons and photo safaris. There's money to actually do kind of car-based expeditions out to remote places to take photos and to gather more information for these articles. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've done some, car trips, day trips, and Wikimedia Loves Monuments, but, you're limited as you start getting further away from home base.
Right, all right. So there's the page, Wikipedia Summer of Monuments. Take a look. I don't know if there's a coordination page at this point. I mean, the funny thing is this post says here's Leo Zimmerman, but I don't know of a link to a coordination page at this point.
I mean, we are.
Yeah, it's new this week.
The area where this area of the sort of the southern United States is the southern, so it's southeastern, but it looks central. So outside of North Carolina and Georgia, people go on vacation, at least from my knowledge, to like along the coast, and you could sort of talk some people into doing things while moving south or whatnot. But Oklahoma people don't do that. Kansas, the only two are really Georgia and North Carolina. So these are almost flyover states. I'm surprised that the Midwest wasn't included in this, because I'm sure that in Indiana, states like that there's a large number of these places that need lots of pictures taken.
Well, funny that you mentioned that. There's a certain state, Indiana, that there's a single editor who's maybe done all of them.
Makes sense.
Well, I think maybe we'll try to, for one of these episodes, get Leo Zimmerman on to talk about this project and see how they're doing it. That sounds kind of cool. Let's take a look at the other story here. What was it? Wiki Loves Earth. Did we talk about Wiki Loves Earth?
No, we have not yet.
Okay. I can't remember whether we had it in a pre-conversation or whether it was in this conversation. So Wiki Loves Earth is a project that was also mentioned at the metrics meeting, which is definitely not as well known as Wiki Loves Monuments, but this is an international photography competition on natural heritage. And it looks pretty cool. And it looks like it was initiated by Wikimedia Ukraine in 2013, but they're trying to get more publicity for this. Anyone know anything more about this other than they're trying to do more this year? Try to show it on the screen here. So there's Wiki Loves Earth.
This is the first time I've ever heard of this.
Yeah, apparently they had it last year, just as a limited thing. But then they've got Netherlands and Germany involved with it, but not a lot of other participating countries. So this might be an interesting thing to get involved. Since Wiki Loves Monuments is, I won't say winding down, but it is harder and harder to find things to fill Wiki Loves Monuments with. So this is the page for Wiki Loves Earth. All right. So lastly, let's take a look at some of the top pages, which were kind of interesting this past week. So if you take a look at our top 25 pages, I'm going to try to bring it up here. My speech ball of death doesn't stop spinning. Okay. Sorry, I got to get the top 25 up here again. Okay, so we have, hopefully you can see this coming up on the screen there. Maya Angelou was the big one from last week. Obviously because she had passed away and a lot of people are looking her up. Google Doodle subject Rachel Carson was number 2. Marine biologist, conservationist. This should definitely make the women scientist fans on Wikipedia happy. Rachel Carson was number 2. Any other ones that are kind of interesting? Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones. 3 articles related to Game of Thrones in the top 25. Actually, in the top 10.
I look forward to
Haley's comment is an
final
one.
Haley's Comet. Why Haley's Comet? There's a Reddit thread. Mark Twain. It's on a Reddit thread. Now, Amazon. This is interesting. So Amazon was number 6 in terms of lookups, and I think someone changed these write-up, right? So originally the write-up here in this list said did not have the dispute with Hachette, but now it looks like that is written in there. So if you didn't know, there was kind of a weird dispute between Amazon and the publisher Hachette about whether they were stocking books in a timely manner, and that got a lot of people looking up Amazon's article on Wikipedia. Anything else? X-Men, Game of Thrones, big time. FIFA World Cup, number 12.
FIFA's going to start being number 1 for the next few weeks as the World Cup goes through, because it's one of the best-known worldwide sporting events.
Right. I would think so.
I mean, there are a bunch of World Cups, but when you say the World Cup, there's only one thing people think of, right?
Right.
You know, that's the sign.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of India-related stuff. So number 13, Indian politician, one-time model, Narendra Modi, newly elected head of India, and then the Article 370, which I really didn't know anything about until I looked at this list. Controversial amendment to the Indian Constitution. Cremation was number 23. Wikipedia's article on the ritual burning of dead bodies.
The amendment changes the citizenship status of Kashmiri residents. There's the India-Pakistan issues. Basically, it's trying to normalize their citizenship, which is controversial.
Then cremation for some reason.
Yeah, there was a Reddit thread about it. I think Reddit is driving an interestingly large amount of our traffic, given its relatively small website.
It is interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's been doing that for the last year or so. So anytime a Reddit thread gets attention, it gets a massive spike on Wikipedia.
Is it because it then gets a BuzzFeed article or 10? Is it just an endless internet meme circle jerk?
It could be.
Technical term.
It very well could be that Reddit is the kind of what's the best analogy? The Oort cloud or the
clearinghouse?
The clearinghouse, the primordial soup for other types of sites that just grab stuff and just write SEO optimized headlines around these things. It could very well be.
So I rather like the.
I mean, even Thought Catalog, which is a.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, there's quite a few other sites like Thought Catalog is one that everything, number or whatever, and you look, oh, this is going to be interesting, and then you're like, no, this is just Reddit posts from Ask Reddit. So it seems to be even just copy and pasting Reddit into your website has become a way of writing articles, which I'm sure makes your inner journalist unhappy.
Well, it would have like 5 years ago, but it's so standard a part of the landscape now that I'm not even surprised anymore. James also pointed to this site, Wikipedia, which shows some of the top 20 articles for the most recent week.
Yeah, so this is focused on edits rather than reads. And so this kind of tells you what the community on English Wikipedia has actually been doing. So, deaths in 2014, 513 changes in 7 days. In the context of 660,000 changes. So, 0.1% of all edits on Wikipedia in a week were just to one article. It's kind of interesting because it's so spread out. Some of these are unsurprising, like deaths in 2014, like Barry Bergdahl, like the French Open happening. But others of them are interesting because it kind of suggests something happening. So Swift, the new programming language from Apple, appears because it's a new programming language from Apple. So it's sexy and it's technological and it's new this week. So it's a new article. But then you get things like the article Electronic Cigarette, which both has one of the top 5 edited talk pages and also one of the top 20 edited articles at all with 194 changes, but only by 11 authors. 11 authors have made 194 changes in 1 week to one article. So you have to think, there's clearly some debate happening there. But it's a really interesting way of looking at the article.
I find interesting that the NCAA Division I basketball tournament is still in the top how many ever articles worth of changes. How much has changed since March Madness ended?
Is that when it was
how
over?
Many ever weeks ago?
Oh, no, it's baseball.
Yeah. Oh, baseball. That makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read it as basketball, too.
Juan Carlos of Spain.
College World Series. Yes.
Right. But to echo what James said, you can imagine why Bo Bergdahl being in the mainstream news or some of these other ones like FIFA World Cup has 80 authors. That's like, okay, mainstream topic, 80 authors. But then something like Swift has 75 unique authors. That still shows that Wikipedia is very much a geek's encyclopedia there. I mean, that's a lot of people on a brand new programming language to chime in with information about it.
And Working Holiday Visa with 356 changes by 4 authors.
Oh, I can up.
Most of which are a couple of IPs.
Yeah, that was coming to mind is. Do we need to semi-protect this?
Yeah.
Why would Working Holiday Visa have that many edits?
Looking at it, a lot of anonymous making possibly the same anonymous person, but with a rotating IP, making a huge number of little flags, one by one, each edit. It's a pretty mammoth piece of work.
So odd.
Yeah.
Appealing to that.
This is an impressive list.
Oh, definitely. But working holiday visa, this feels like it might actually belong better on Wikivoyage than on Wikipedia. And not to say that this isn't valuable content, but help people finding out where they can go and work on holiday. Anyway.
Yeah. Fascinating. New articles, OSX Yosemite, that makes sense. I don't know what this is. What is that? Punk hardcore band in 1991? Huh. Okay.
What band is this? One.
That one.
Man About Town magazine is one. Okay.
Interesting. All right. All right, so what are you folks looking forward to this week in Wikipedia land?
It's early registration deadline for Wikimania.
Oh, is that right? Good point. Very good point. So when is the deadline?
Let's see here, June 16? June 15.
June 15 is the early registration deadline. Unfortunately, I still think you need a credit card to register, right? Which is probably not a big deal for most people. But there was some debate on the mailing list for folks who were expecting PayPal or other alternative payment systems.
Yeah, Wikicoin, haha.
Wikicoin. Dogecoin and Bitcoin, maybe. All right, Wikimania 2014.
I mean, I need to end up I need buying my subscription, also my hotel room, also my airplane ticket. I'm behind the curve at the moment.
So you're making it there? You going?
Yes, because I researched for my thesis there, so.
Cool.
I kind of have to show up.
Which be your that would be your second one. Second Wikimania.
I'm trying to combine my anthro and my philosophy into one big thesis on Wikidata, so because nobody's ever studied it or really looked at it, so it should be interesting.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks, folks, for joining us. And James had to run. He left his left a little message saying sorry he had to go. But thanks again for talking about recent issues in Wikipedia, and we'll see you next time on Wikipedia Weekly.
See you.
Bye.